In 1886, the town of Silver Creek, lost in the canyons of Arizona, was a place where fates intertwined as intricately as the winding trails in the surrounding mountains. The sun, mercilessly scorching from dawn to dusk, only underscored the harshness of this land, where everyone survived as they could, holding on to their secrets tighter than to gold veins. It was here, led by desperate hope and overwhelming shame, that young Emily Parker arrived. She was 20 years old, but the deep shadows under her eyes and her tightly pressed lips spoke of a life that had already left its ruthless marks on her. Emily rode in a dilapidated stagecoach, its creaking wheels counting the last miles of her old life. She wore a simple but carefully sewn pale blue dress, which had once been a wedding gift from her late mother. Her wheat-colored hair was tucked under modest bonnet, but even it could not conceal the nervous trembling that ran through her body. In her hands, she clutched a small copper cross, the only thing left from her happy childhood in Kansas. She arrived as a mail-order bride for Jonathan Blake, a local rancher who, according to rumor, was as unyielding as the rocks surrounding Silver Creek. But her heart was full not of hope for a new life, but of intrigue and fear of the unknown. Emily knew she was in for a difficult role. Behind her lay a disgrace she was trying to hide from the whole world, a dark secret that could ruin any hope for happiness. She needed protection, a sanctuary, and Jonathan Blake, who had offered marriage by correspondence, seemed to be the only way out. In his letters, he presented himself as an honest and reliable man, the owner of a thriving ranch. But what if it was just another lie? She could only guess. Jonathan Blake was waiting for her on the platform. He was about 30, and he was tall, with broad shoulders and a build that spoke of hard labor. His face, tanned and weathered, was devoid of excess emotion, but in his dark brown eyes, something deep and pensive could be read. His thick dark hair, touched with gray at the temples, was carelessly combed back. He wore a worn but clean flannel shirt and faded jeans. He was not like the ideal gentleman she had imagined, but in his appearance, there was an undeniable reliability, the very kind that was valued in this wild land. "Miss Parker." His voice was low, calm, and deep, like an echo in a canyon. He didn't smile, but in his gaze there was no contempt, only quiet anticipation. Emily's throat tightened with emotion as she nodded. "Yes, Mr. Blake," she asked. "Jonathan." "Let's go," he said, and briefly nodded toward a waiting wagon. She followed him, feeling the curious stares of the townsfolk. In Silver Creek, every new soul was worth its weight in gold, and a mail-order bride, and such a young one at that, was a real event for them. Emily felt her cheeks burn with shame and tried to look only at the dusty ground beneath her feet. She knew she couldn't be honest with him, and this guilt weighed on her like a heavy burden. She was impure, and this knowledge poisoned every minute for her. Jonathan's ranch was a few miles from town. It was located in a picturesque valley, surrounded by cactus-covered hills. The house, though small, was sturdy and well-kept. Next to it were a barn and a corral for the cattle. Everything spoke of the fact that Jonathan was a man of action. He invited her inside, and she, timidly stepping across the threshold, felt a strange sense of relief. It was quiet and cozy here. "You can get settled in," he said, his voice slightly softer. "Agatha, our housekeeper, will show you around. I'll be in the barn." Agatha, an elderly woman with kind eyes and a wrinkled face, met her with a sincere smile. "Welcome, dear. There isn't much, but what's here is yours." Emily nodded gratefully. Agatha helped her unpack her things, and soon Emily was alone in the small but clean room. She took off her bonnet, and her hair fell over her shoulders. Looking in the small mirror, she saw her reflection, a pale, frightened face, marked by long-standing anxiety. "I can't do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can't lie to him." At that moment, she felt a wave of despair wash over her. She wanted to run away, to disappear, but where? She had no money, no strength, no support. She was alone in this wild, foreign world. In the evening, when Jonathan returned from work, he invited her to dinner. They sat at the table, and the atmosphere was filled with an awkward silence. Agatha, trying to ease the tension, told stories about life on the ranch, about wild animals and harsh winters. Jonathan listened attentively, occasionally giving Emily pensive glances. "How was your journey?" he asked at last. "Long," Emily replied, her voice almost inaudible. "But beautiful." He nodded. "It's beautiful here, but also harsh." She remained silent. How could she tell him the truth? How could she admit that she wasn't who she pretended to be? She wasn't a pure, innocent bride. She was broken. When dinner was over, Jonathan stood up. Tomorrow we'll go to the judge to formalize the marriage. Are you ready? Emily felt her heart sink. Was she ready? No. But she had no choice. Yes, she answered, trying to make her voice sound confident. Jonathan nodded and walked out. Emily was left alone, and terror seized her. Tomorrow she would have to lie to him, to tie her life to a man who didn't know the real her. And this was just the beginning of her secret. She knew it was all a deception, but she was forced to go through with it. The feeling of guilt and shame was literally suffocating her. She was not ready for what was about to happen and didn't know how long she could hide her secret. The next morning came with an uneasy calm. The air was filled with the scent of fresh grass and dust, but to Emily, it felt stale and heavy. She put on her best dress and, looking in the mirror, tried to convince herself that everything would be all right. She had a few hours before they were to go into town. That was enough time to find a way to postpone the inevitable. Going downstairs to the kitchen, she saw Jonathan already eating breakfast. He looked just as calm and composed as he had yesterday. "Are you ready?" he asked, setting down his cup. Emily flinched. "Jonathan, I need to tell you something before we go to the judge." He slowly looked up. "I'm listening. I have a little brother. He's sick. He's very weak, and I have to take care of him. He's traveling with me. He was supposed to arrive on the next stagecoach, but..." She trailed off. Dali sounded so clumsy. Jonathan was silent, and his gaze became even more serious. He was watching her carefully, and Emily felt her lie crumble. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" he asked at last, his voice devoid of emotion. "I was afraid. I thought you wouldn't want to. I would have agreed anyway. But why did you lie to me?" He stood up and walked over to her. She saw that in his eyes there was not anger, but rather disappointment. I didn't know how to explain it to you. Please, believe me." Her voice broke. He stared at her for a long time, then nodded. "Fine. We'll wait for him. But I must tell you, Emily, I don't tolerate lies." She felt a sense of relief, but it was short-lived. Her lie was only a postponement, not a solution. A few days later, when she had almost believed she had escaped the inevitable, there was a knock on the door. On the doorstep stood a man whose face was familiar to Emily. It was the sheriff, whom she had briefly seen in town. His gaze was tense, and she felt a chill run down her spine. "Mr. Blake," the sheriff said, nodding to Jonathan. "We have a problem here. We're looking for someone. Her name is Emily Parker. The mail-order bride, I hear." Emily felt the ground fall out from under her. Jonathan, noticing her reaction, placed a hand on her shoulder, and she flinched. "Yes, that's her," Jonathan said calmly. "What's the matter?" "We have information that she stole a valuable item from her former employer's home. We have to arrest her," the sheriff said, taking a step toward Emily. Emily closed her eyes. It was over now. She felt Jonathan move her behind him. "Proof." His voice was like steel. "The testimony of her former employer, and a description of the item. A small inlaid music box. Have you seen it?" Jonathan shook his head. "No, and I don't believe a word of it. You can't arrest her without a warrant." "We have a warrant," the sheriff said, pulling a paper from his pocket and showing it to Jonathan. Emily, feeling she had nothing left to lose, stepped forward. "That's not true. I didn't steal anything. It's all a lie." Her voice was full of despair. The sheriff, ignoring her words, looked at Jonathan. "I'm forced to take her in. She might be hiding, and we need the bounty." Jonathan stared calmly at the sheriff. "Listen to me. You came onto my land uninvited. You're accusing my fiancée of theft, and you're doing it when I know you're as corrupt as everyone else in this town. I know you're not seeking justice, you're seeking profit. I won't hand her over until I see irrefutable evidence." Their gazes locked. The tension was almost tangible. In that moment, Emily felt not fear, but a great compassion for Jonathan. He, a man who didn't know her, was protecting her from injustice. She wasn't sure she was worthy of such protection. At that moment, as the tension peaked, Emily felt a strange sensation. It wasn't fear or anger, it was something new. She suddenly remembered how, as a child, her father, a carpenter, taught her to make things with her own hands. He always said that true beauty lies in the details, in what is hidden from sight. And it was this knowledge that helped her. "Wait." Emily suddenly cried out to the sheriff. "I know where that box is." The sheriff and Jonathan looked at her in surprise. "It's hidden in a place I know about, and I can give it to you. But I didn't steal it, and you can't arrest me. Because what you're looking for isn't the box, it's something else." The sheriff smiled with disbelief. "What are you talking about? Girl, the box is the only reason I'm here." "No," Emily cried out. "I'll show you." She quickly went to her room and returned, holding a small cloth. The box was just a lure. "You want this," she said. And with those words, she lifted the cloth to reveal what she was hiding. The moment Jonathan saw what Emily held in her hands, his face changed. The shock that froze in his eyes was so powerful, it seemed like time had stopped. It wasn't a music box, not a jewel, and not something that could be stolen. It was a small, intricately carved wooden wedding ring with the engraving J.B. His face turned ashen. For a moment, he forgot about the sheriff, about Emily's presence, about the world around him. He just stared at the ring, which he thought had been lost forever. "This," he choked out, his voice barely audible. Emily, seeing his reaction, knew she had made the right, but very risky, move. She didn't know what this ring meant to him, but judging by his reaction, it was incredibly important. "It's your father's ring," she whispered. They gave it to me. In exchange." The sheriff, who had been standing by, finally broke out of his stupor. He stepped closer, his eyes narrowed. "What does this mean? Girl, why are you spouting nonsense?" Emily, gathering all her courage, looked up at him. "You came for me because my former employer, Mr. Austin, accused me of theft. But I didn't steal anything. He said that this ring was more valuable than anything in his house, and that I could take it too. To save my life." Jonathan finally turned to her, his face contorted with anger. "Save you from what, Emily? What did you do?" His voice was no longer calm, but thundering. "I didn't do anything." She began to cry, tears running down her cheeks, mixing with the dust. He threatened me. He wanted to force me to marry him. And I couldn't. And then he said I had a choice. Either him, or I had to take something that would make me impure. So I couldn't marry anyone else but him. So I could never be happy. I'm no longer pure," she sobbed, choking on her tears. "And now my life is ruined." Jonathan sharply exhaled, his eyes fixed on the ring in her hand as if it were a snake. "Impure? What does that mean? What kind of curse is this?" He growled. I lost my innocence," she breathed out, her body trembling with shame and fear. He said that if I stayed, he would force me to be his property. And that this ring is like my price, the price for my purity, and that now I'll never be anyone's wife. Jonathan's face turned pale, and then it was overcome with such fury that Emily was scared. It wasn't just anger, it was a rage that had been growing for years, and now it had found its release. "Austin," he growled, his hands clenching into fists. "I'll find him. I'll kill him." The sheriff, who had been standing by, felt he was losing control of the situation. He took a step forward, but Jonathan, without even looking at him, stopped him with just a glance. "Are you still here?" he asked in a cold tone. "If you want to arrest her, you'll have to go through me. But if you don't leave right now, I'll go to town and tell everyone that you and Austin are working together." The sheriff understood he had lost. He backed away, his face pale. I'll be back," he muttered, and quickly left. When they were alone, Jonathan walked over to Emily. He looked at her with such pain and compassion that she felt her heart clench. He slowly reached out, taking the ring from her palm. You can tell me." "How?" He couldn't finish the sentence. Emily, seeing his pain, told him the whole truth. How she had worked for Mr. Austin, how he had threatened her, how he had forced her to take this ring in exchange for her life. She told him about her fears, about how she was now impure forever and could never be anyone's wife. She cried, and her tears fell to the ground, mixing with the dust. Jonathan listened to her, his face like stone, but in his eyes there was no longer anger, only deep sorrow. He took her hand and placed the ring in it. "You are not impure," he said. His voice was soft but firm. "You are innocent. It's not you. It's him. I'll find him. I'll make him pay for what he did to you and my family." Emily looked up at him. In her eyes was hope. She finally understood that he wouldn't judge her. He was on her side. But she didn't know that his revenge was only just beginning. Jonathan returned to town from the ranch. His face was a mask, and a cold fire burned in his eyes. He wasn't looking for the sheriff, he was looking for Austin. He knew this man couldn't just disappear. He was too greedy and overconfident. Jonathan went straight to the saloon where, as he knew, Austin liked to spend his evenings. Entering the establishment, he found him immediately. Austin was sitting at a table, surrounded by his friends, laughing loudly. He was in a good mood, completely unaware that his life was about to change. Jonathan walked toward him slowly but determinedly. His hand was on the handle of his Colt, but he wasn't going to shoot. Not yet. Death would be too easy a punishment for Austin. Austin, Jonathan said, his voice low and menacing. We need to talk. Austin, looking up, smiled. Jonathan, what brings you here? Decided to have a drink. Jonathan, without a word, threw the wedding ring onto the table. Austin instantly recognized it. His face paled, and his smile vanished. He looked at Jonathan, then at the ring. Where did you get that? He whispered, full of fear. Emily gave it to me, Jonathan replied, his eyes piercing Austin's. She told me everything. About how you killed my father to steal the ring. About how you threatened her to force her to marry you. Jonathan couldn't finish his sentence. Austin, afraid that the truth would come out, pulled out his Colt and shot at Jonathan. The bullet missed, hitting the wall. The whole saloon froze, all eyes fixed on them. Jonathan, without blinking, drew his own Colt. You made a huge mistake, he said. You could have avoided this. But now you'll get what you deserve. Austin fired another shot, but Jonathan, being a more experienced gunman, dodged it and shot back. The bullet hit Austin's hand, knocking the Colt from his grasp. Then he shot him in the leg. Austin fell to the floor, screaming. I won't kill you, Jonathan said, walking over to him. I'll leave you alive so you can live with this stigma. You'll live with the fact that I'll tell everyone what you're really like, that you're a murderer and a thief, and that you tried to take a life from an innocent girl. Let everyone know who you really are. Austin tried to get up but couldn't. He looked at Jonathan, his eyes full of hatred and fear. Jonathan, turning to the crowd that had gathered around them, said, I ask you to help me take him to the sheriff. He has committed a crime, and he must be punished. The men in the saloon understood that Jonathan was right. They took Austin and led him to the sheriff. Jonathan followed them, holding the ring in his hand. When they arrived, the sheriff already knew what had happened. He looked at Austin, then at Jonathan, and understood that he had nothing more to hide. I knew, the sheriff whispered. He forced me to be silent. He threatened me and my family. Jonathan nodded calmly. He knew the sheriff was telling the truth. He handed him the ring and left, leaving the two of them alone. When he returned to the ranch, Emily was waiting for him. She saw that he had changed. In his eyes there was no longer pain, only determination. Did he get what he deserved? She asked. Yes, he got what he deserved, and he won't threaten you anymore. You are free, Emily. You can do whatever you want. Emily walked up to him and hugged him. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for everything. He hugged her back. You don't have to thank me. You saved my family, Emily. You found my father's ring. You gave me back my life. They stood for a long time, holding each other, and in that moment they understood that they were no longer strangers. They were a family. They had found solace and hope for a new future in each other.